Hello, Oscillator Sync here. I believe it's pretty accurate to say that I'm a bit of a fan of the more esoteric side of electronic instruments. I can't remember the last time I bought an instrument that had a keyboard, and if a synth has a reputation for being chaotic or hard to wrangle, well, you can count me in. There was a rule I made for myself though, a threshold that I have been unwilling to cross. I know what you're thinking. Isn't that just a patch cable? And yes, you're right. However, if you look closely, that's not a mini jack cable, the type that we're familiar with in the Eurorack compatible world. That's a banana jack, and that's a big problem. In the already weird niche and nerdy corner of synths that I like to live in, banana jack synths feel like the outliers among the outliers. I see banana jacks and I think of Buchla, Serge, Siat Lombard, the true niche. And that speaks to the real reason for the rule, because I'm not afraid of the weirdness, I'm afraid of the implications for my financial stability. And yet here we are. I recently sold some instruments that weren't being used enough to keep hold of, and while pondering on which instrument I could fall in love with next, I remembered being interested but scared of the Lorre Mill Double Knot version 3. I went back and watched every video I could find about it, read the manual, and then in a moment of madness, I bought this fascinating banana jack instrument. This video isn't really going to be a tutorial and not really a review. What this is a guy who is nerdy and enthusiastic about this stuff, who somehow managed to foster an audience and community who are also nerdy and enthusiastic about this stuff. And this lucky guy just wants to show off his cool new toy. So if you'll indulge me, let's meet my new synth and the inevitable harbinger of my impending financial ruin. I think what drew me to the double knot in the very first instance is that it does something that I really appreciate in an electronic instrument, and that is that it takes a selection of very simple but exquisitely executed ideas and then allows you as the player to experiment and explore how those different ideas interact. So fundamentally, this instrument is a very simple thing. Here you've got a clock generator, which kind of is the beating heart of the whole thing. And then essentially you've got two entirely duplicated architectures. You've got an oscillator, another oscillator here. You've got an envelope, another envelope here. You've got these two utilities which can either act like a VCA or a slew limiter. And then you've got kind of the heart of the instrument and what makes it, I think, probably really special, which is the shift register. If you move in the world of modular Eurorack, perhaps, you might be familiar with the idea of a shift register. You might have come across it in the context of something like the Turing machine from Music Thing, or maybe the sequencer that's on the Moog Labyrinth. And they're both things based around a shift register. They do, however, sprinkle all that sort of chaos, bit flipping, chance stuff on top, which is cool stuff, but it's not fundamental to what a shift register is, because a shift register is a really simple thing. And this is an overused metaphor, but I'm going to use it because it's a good one. You can think of it like a chain of people with a bucket. You pour some water into the first person's bucket, and then they pour it into the second person's bucket, then they pour it into the third person's bucket, and that water moves down the chain until it gets to the end of the chain, and then it's tipped on the floor or the fire, depending on what the metaphor is. In the case of the double knot, there are 8 people with buckets, if you like. We can put water into the first bucket, either by putting a signal into this input here, or by pressing this red button and the equivalent on the other voice as well. And I just mentioned input, and you might be wondering, well, how do I know that something is an input and what's an output, given that there are no labels here whatsoever? And it's slightly unusual, but it's really easy to sort of get your head around once you're in there. And basically, if something is on a line, so here, for example, here, here, here and here, that's an input. And if something is off a line, it's an output. So all of these ones inside the boxes, this one here, that one here, these, they are all outputs. So I'm going to press the red button and nothing is going to happen. So why isn't the water going into the first bucket? Well, the other part of this puzzle is that water only gets passed from bucket to bucket or into the first bucket on a clock pulse. So we need to start the clock going in order for water to go into the bucket. So if I press the red button on a clock pulse, it will put water in the bucket. And we can put it in this one. And off we go. You'll notice that when water goes into the first bucket, that's also when we hear a note from each of the voices. You can see it go into the first bucket and then be passed down the last few buckets and out the end. So what do we do if we want to create a loop? Well, what we can do is we can take a pipe from one of the buckets and run it back into the first bucket. So now when it gets to the end, come back. And we can do the same on the top shift register as well. Put another bit of water in, 2 buckets. And we can take a moment just to enjoy the simple beauty of a nice triangle core oscillator. The voice is being modulated in the amplitude domain with an envelope. And the envelope is controlled by these 2 knobs here. This first knob here is it's called the sync. It's basically a decay, works backwards though. So if I turn it down, we get a much longer, and it's a really, really long envelope. It goes on for like a minute or more at its lowest, as it were, its longest. And if we go up, we get a much shorter percussive. It's a lovely natural decay. The other knob that we have here is basically a velocity, and actually we're basically at the loudest it will go clean. And if we turn it down, it goes quieter, of course. Notice that it doesn't affect the note that's currently happening. It's just basically sampled when it plays the next note, which is really neat. If we go up past this halfway point, we get distortion instead, changing the timbre. Sort of gets perceptively louder, but isn't really getting louder in terms of its peak. Again, it's just a simple thing done really well. It's a nice saturation. We also, on each of these envelopes, have this button here, and this basically enables a ratchet or repeat, a loop. So I can turn it on here, and if we just shorten it a bit, while there is water in the bucket, the first bucket, it will loop. The loop length is affected by both controls. Make it shorter to the point that it becomes a note. So that's the main thing, but the velocity also affects it as well. Gets slightly longer as the velocity is turned up. Cool. So we do have one other interesting thing here that will become more interesting the further we go, and that's this control here, which introduces FM between the 2 voices, either between both of them, one feeding into one feeding into the other, or no FM. So if we turn this up, we'll start to get some FM between the voices. Those sort of metallic, almost woody sounds in some cases, gongy sounds. But we can have it so only the top one is FMing the bottom one, or the other way around, or neither. We'll come back to that. So we've got a really basic rhythmic thing happening here. What could we do to spice this up? Well, The first thing we could do is, rather than passing this one from the 8th bucket, we can pass it from the 7th instead. Now we're going to get some sort of polymetric thing happening. Which is cool. You will notice, however, that although we're going back from the 7th bucket to the start, we do still get water in the 8th bucket as well. Some sort of quantum thing happening there. That becomes really, really useful. So, currently we're just thinking in terms of rhythm, and although we could change the pitch of the oscillator with the knob, let's sequence something, as it were. We have a pitch input and an attenuverter on this knob here. Frequency, we should say, rather than pitch. So, what can we use to sequence this? Well, probably the most interesting output on the shift register is this one here, which is an R2R DAC. Essentially what it's going to do is take a look at all of the buckets, and depending which buckets are filled, it's going to derive a voltage from that. It's not just going to add up all the buckets, the actual positions matter as well. Essentially it's like a binary counter. So you've got 1s, 2s, 4s, 8s, 16s, 32s, that kind of idea. It's weighted. So we can take the DAC output and plumb it into the frequency input, and now we get a pitch sequence. And as I mentioned, this is derived from the state of the bucket. So if I add another bucket in here, we're going to get a different sequence, not just in the time domain, but in the frequency domain as well. Nice. So at the moment, the rhythm and the pitch are happening based on the same parameter, on the same shift register rather. But it doesn't have to. We can derive the pitch from the other sequence. Because that has a different length, we start getting a more interesting interaction. Perhaps we want to modulate the velocity of this first top one based on something. So we could take one of the bucket outputs and plumb it into the velocity. It's always hitting on that one. So we've got a velocity variation happening on that voice, and we could do something similar over here perhaps. We're going to take this bucket. So you can start getting these really complex sequences based off these basic ideas. Maybe we want to modulate the length of of the envelope. Because we'll take this one here. Similar in the other direction. I'll take this one perhaps. So now we're getting to a really sort of complex pattern, which is sort of phasing and going over itself. One of the most interesting inputs we have is this one here. This modulates the frequency of the clock. So we can do things like take one of the outputs, we can stack this one perhaps, and bring it into the clock. Now whenever there's something in this bucket, the clock slows down. And I find this completely like hypnotic. Because this shift register is modulating the clock speed, we change the buckets, it's going to change the groove as well. More buckets, more often slowing things down. This one as well. Obviously completely unquantized, so sometimes finding it's nice. Finding melodies is difficult sometimes, but we got there. Frequency modulation has an attenuator as well, so we could take another step, this one perhaps, and have it only frequency modulated when there's a bucket there. And then you can play with this and find all these different kind of grooves. The process that we just used there and the outcome, you might argue, is somewhat unusual, but it was deterministic, which is to say that as long as the same buckets were filled, the same things were patched, the same knob positions were there, you would always get back to those grooves that we just touched upon. Everything was locked inside the shift registers. But the double knot also excels at doing things which are generative, non-deterministic, random or chaotic, probably more correctly. So let's try patching it that way. And one of the most interesting ways to achieve this is to feed the bucket input, if you like, not with a step in the shift register, but actually from an oscillator. So here we have the square wave version of this oscillator, and we can plug it in here. Now, you might think this is going to then just blast through there, but remember, it's only going to fill on a clock pulse, or actually on a signal here, but we might get to that. So if we now start the clock, depending on the pitch of this oscillator, it's either going to be high or low when you get the clock pulse. Essentially, there's an interference pattern going between the oscillator frequency and the frequency of the clock. So if we, although it is constantly evolving anyway, we might start to hear some things, some rhythms which keep coming back around. Right. Do the same on the other side as well if we like. So we can take the square wave output of this oscillator and plug it into the bucket input here. And you heard that we basically got silence for a minute there, and that's just because it happened to be down for a long period of time. Just the reverb there. Cool. Now where this gets quite interesting is when the frequency of these oscillators is changing, of course. You can hear that they're kind of getting a kind of a loop here, but if I change the frequencies here, we'll start getting slightly different patterns happening. You can hear that that right hand one is now dun, 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 dun. So the interference pattern between the two oscillators and the clock, which also is an oscillator, is defining the rhythms that we get. Now, what happens if we modulate the inputs here? So we could take the DAC output of oscillator or voice 1 and use it to modulate voice 2. So now we've got a situation where this voice is defining this sequence's DAC contents, but then the DAC contents are going to modulate this voice's frequency, changing the interference patterns on a step-by-step basis. And then we can do it the other way as well. This generative platform here, which nevertheless finds moments of stability and then shifts away from them. And we can take some of these DAC outputs and start them to affect other things as well. So maybe we'll use this to affect the sync. Sorry, input. And maybe we'll use this DAC output to moments of stability, and then we move. Perhaps we can use one of the outputs here to affect that clock frequency. And we start getting these really complex grooves. Perhaps we can use one of the steps from the top shift register to affect the length of the other voice. And vice versa. With the velocity on this one. And then we can turn on the ratcheting on the voices. Slow the clock down so it lingers on the voices a bit longer. Have some FM. Maybe widen some of the pitch variation now. And we find ourselves in a buckler type place, I think. Not quite chorale. Not far off though. Very whimsical. Got a few patch cables left. Haven't really touched on these utilities, haven't really needed to for these patches. Perhaps we could take the clock, which I have got set up. Sorry, this bottom one here is set up to be a slew limiter currently. We could take that and bring the output of the slew limiter into the FM amount. Create an LFO from the clock. Or we could take the square output and run it into the FM amount. Or we have a sync input for the oscillators, and usually we run it off a square wave to get hard sync. But perhaps we'll run it off the triangle instead, which gives you a weird, unstable sync. So you can get into just weird alien spaces as well. Slap a load of reverb on that, make it long. course, lots of other places that you can take the double knot. And I think that's part of its appeal. It can be so many different things depending on what you want to do. None of them are totally conventional in their approach, but if we wanted to be more sort of obviously sort of drum machiney and percussive, we can do that. I mean, get the clock going and maybe get rid of all this reverb. Turn it down a bit. And we could take the output of our envelope and run it into the frequency for that one there. That's going to give us kind of a more kick drum thing. But perhaps we don't want it to be a kick every single time. We could do something maybe with taking the output of the envelope into this top utility here, which I've got set up to be a VCA. Come out of that into the pitch, but then control that VCA with one of the steps here. And now it's only going to be a kick drum when there's this step here as well. Otherwise it's the bass. And perhaps we'll make something here that's a bit pingy and 5 steps. FM that top one there with that really high one there to get kind of a bit of fuzz. Maybe modulate this one here. Again, we've got those steps affecting which ones go up and down. We could... what else could we do? Let's take this step here and have that affect the velocity. DAC. And we can get some of those grooves in there as well by plumbing something into the clock. It's gone a bit wonky. It's so much fun. So that's how I broke my rule and broke my last taboo. The double knot is not for everyone, but I find it endlessly fascinating, and this has been an instrument that I have used literally every day, I think, since I got it. Every evening I spend some time with it and just patch and see what I can find. There's so much stuff that I haven't really kind of demonstrated yet. There's some really chaotic, clicky, Wrangler style patches that you can build. Haven't really played with the sync, though it is in use here. Haven't played with the clock input for the shift registers. Perhaps I'll do another video on it at another date. But I think that will do for now. It's already longer than I intended. What a surprise. But if you're still here, thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, then as always, a like, subscribe, comment, all good, all useful.